welcome back to Historical Prologue. I remain Solomon Kennedy Jiramado. So in the last video, we presented what Jehovah's Witness as an organization teach concerning the person of Jesus Christ. We laid two emphasis in what they teach. We said first of all that one, they teach that Jesus is a God, and secondly, Jesus is Angel Michael. Now in teaching that Jesus is a God, they are saying that Jesus is a lesser God than the Father Almighty, but he's been made to be raised above the angels in this sense. Okay, so he's a legitimate lesser God, but he doesn't deserve any worship. And in teaching who is as Angel Michael, there's an equivocation that when you talk about the pre-incarnate Christ and the post-incarnate Christ, you're talking about one and the same person, Angel Michael. So when Christ was coming down in the form of his incarnation, Michael ceased to exist. Then the person of Christ came. Then afterwards, Michael is the form that Christ is in right now. So in this video, we are going to try to respond to this. And in responding to this, we look first at the claim that Jesus is a God, and secondly, that Jesus is the angel Michael. So let us get into it. Jesus as a God. Now for Jesus as a God, there are various approaches we could take in this respect. I would like us to take the approach by focusing more on the translation and making a case against the translation through the context and the understanding that the writer and the readers of John would have envisioned or would have understood things to be. The last time we quoted in the New World Translation of the Bible, in John chapter 1 verse 1, they read it in this sense: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. Again, as against all other major translations of the Bible, which reads, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we see a slight distinction in the very last statement of John chapter 1 verse 1. I'd like us now to break this particular this particular verse down. In John chapter 1 verse 1, we can look at the first statement, the second statement, third statement as three distinct things. The first statement is a statement of association. The second statement is a statement of distinction. And the third statement is the statement of identification. Why do I say this? In the first statement, John is trying to say something. John starts his writing, the prologue of John starts by saying, in the beginning was the Word. Everyone who's familiar with the Old Testament, immediately he reads this, his mind goes back to the beginning at the book of Genesis, the prologue of the book of Genesis. In that prologue, it reads, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So John is trying to draw the minds of his readers to the beginning in the book of Genesis. And he's trying to bring the association by trying to tell them it is the same beginning that the God in Genesis started the creation. This is why if you look at the 4 verses in John chapter 1, chapter 1 verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 4, it talks about the creation account and how the Word was actively involved in bringing things into being. So this is why I'm saying that the first statement is a statement of association. John is trying to tell us that the subject of his writing, in this case the Word, has an association by regard to the beginning, to the God who was present at the beginning. So John is telling us that when you talk about the God in the beginning, his subject, the Word in this case, has an association to that God at the very beginning. The second point is the point of distinction. John is also trying to communicate that and say that, and the Word was with God. By emphasizing that the Word was with God, John is trying to tell us that he's not talking in the exact same sense about the same being, the same entity, the same person. No, he's trying to make a distinction between the Word which was at the beginning and the God which was present also at the beginning. So if you were to go back in time, you will see at the annals of creation that God, in this sense, we just want to make a distinction and use the word as well. God was present at the beginning. And secondly, the Word, which John is going to explain to us who he is also present at the very beginning. The third point, the point of identification, this is where the bone of contention comes in. And the Word was a God, or in the Word was a God. A God or God, rather. Now, although the a God is a lesser accepted translation, it is one of the legitimate ways of putting it. Now, if you put it that way, then it has an implication on you. So at this point, the Greek alone is not sufficient to tell us how we should translate it. We let the context of the writer, okay, in this sense, the authorial intent, what is the intent of the author when he was penning this down, inform us as to what we have to believe in regards to this. And as this, I want us to take a biblical basis for it. If you look at the book of Isaiah chapter 43, verses the number 10, there's a particular interesting statement there. I think if you get that down, it will inform us of how to approach the rest of the book, even as we go through this video. In Isaiah chapter 43, verses the number 10, it reads, "You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am He. Before me no God was formed, and after me there shall be none. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me." Again, no matter the context, no matter the commentary you give, the writer of the book of Isaiah, communicating the intent of God to us, is telling us explicably that God is saying that before him there was no God formed. Again, if you read it, okay, use the small g, okay. Even if Jesus is the small g, the writer is trying to tell us that there is no God formed before him, and after him there is no God formed. So now the question begets on us: if the intent of the writer was to tell us, okay, that at the very onset of creation there was another legitimate yet small g God there, then it nullifies the passage in Isaiah. Then what is God trying to communicate here? Even if God was trying again contextually to communicate against the God of other religions, that they are false God, this statement is too broad. He said that before me. So if you take the annals of time, if you take the entire consecration of time, if you take the entire length of time, there can be no point at which another legitimate God different than Yahweh exists. That is the crux of the entirety of this statement. Now, that is the first argument I'm making. The second argument I'm making is therefore, so if I'm saying that, okay, there can be no legitimate gods because of the statement in Isaiah, and we have several other passages which claims the separate oneness, separate uniqueness, and that Yahweh is the only legitimate God, what then do we do with the third statement, "and the word was God," or "and the word was a God"? Again, for that, I would like us to take two more passages again. The passages are Psalm 102, verses 25 to 27, and Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. I would like us to take very close attention to these passages, even as we read it to your hearing, okay? Now, the first one we look at is Psalm 102, verses 25 to 27. I just click on the 24 for you to get who we are talking about. In the 24, it says, "Oh my God, I say, take me not away in the midst of my days, you whose year endure throughout all generations." So we know that the subject in question here, the one being addressed here, the one being talked about here, is the God of the Old Testament, the very God in Genesis, okay? And then in 25-27, which is our point of interest, it reads, "Of old you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe. They will pass away, but you are the same, and your years have no end." You catch the last line, okay? The last line is the claim of immutability, that you are the same. You, the God of the Old Testament, you are the same, and your years have no end. But notice the 25 and 26 as well. Okay, put it in your mind. Even as we go to the book of Hebrews to read something also pertaining to the word that is being addressed in John chapter 1. I just want you to keep mind of this, okay? Now, if you go to the book of Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12, okay? But just so we also get the context of who we are talking about. In that verse 5a, Hebrews 1:5, it said that, "For to which of the angels will God ever say?" The verse 6a. And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, the verse 8a, "But of the Son he says," and the verse 10a say that end. So I am trying to lay the point that the writer of the book of Hebrews, okay, every time he says that of the Son he says, for which of the angels did he ever say? Almost every time he quotes a passage from the Old Testament. Understanding that the Old Testament is the very speech of God, the writer is going to equivocate that when God therefore speaks in the Old Testament, when something is written in the Old Testament, it is the active speaking voice of God. So that when he says that in the verses, okay, and the angels, and again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. The writer here is quoting something in the Old Testament and applying directly to the person of Christ. Okay, because he's the son in question. So, good. So from there, I'd like us to proceed to the reading that we are supposed to take. Hebrews 1, verse 10 to 12. And I read, and you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment, like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed, but you are the same, and your years have no end. Did you catch the almost similar parallelity? Okay, it's like the writer in the book of Hebrews is almost just taking everything that is in Psalm 102. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to just project these two images on the screen. So if you look to your left, you have Psalm 102, and to your right, you have the Hebrews. Okay, and I'll just like to take notice of it again. In Psalm 102, verses 25, even as I look at the screen, okay, he said that of old you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 10, you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. In the verse 26 of Psalm 102, it reads, they will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 11, they will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. In the verse 27 of Psalm 102, but you are the same, and your years have no end. In the verse 12 of Hebrews, like a robe, you roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years have no end. Equivocation. The writer of the book of Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews, isn't trying to hide it. He's trying to apply the very same statement said about Yahweh in the Old Testament to the Son. Again, remember the third question we are trying to ask, okay, or we are trying to answer is a question of identification. What is the nature of the word? What is the being of the word? Again, if you come here, therefore, in Hebrews, it is trying to tell us something. The very nature of the word is the nature of the God in the Old Testament because of these applications. Because there's no way in the world, okay, where these things could be applied to anyone else who does not actually have a legitimate claim to it. Now, if Christ was truly a God and therefore was created, then the statement that you are the same and your years have no end doesn't make sense. Because at one point, that a God didn't exist. So if he didn't exist, how can he be the same? The doctrine, okay, in particular, when you talk about the person of God, of immutability, the unchanging nature of God, is due God alone. He's the only one who does not change in eternity past and in the future to come. Therefore, when the writer of the book of Hebrews applies this thing explicably to the person of Jesus Christ, then we are asked to wonder again, what is the very being of God? Ladies and gentlemen, let me suggest it to you that the very being of God is the very being of the Word. Okay, the very being of the Word, which we identify in this case, is the very being of the God of the Old Testament. It is the very being of the God in Genesis chapter 1. Again, the point we are trying to address is if the authorial intent was to tell us that at the very onset of creation there was another God, then Isaiah 43:10 didn't make sense. It nullifies the statement. And then we come to the question, what is the very being of this God? The very being of this God, we are being made to understand, at least in Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 to 12, that it is the same being as the God in the Old Testament that we identify. And not only that, that the doctrine or the principle or the ability or the quality of immutability that is applicable to Yahweh alone is applied to the Son, saying that you are the same, you do not change, your years have no end. The only one who has been the same from eternity past till now is Yahweh, because he's the only one who didn't come into being. He has always existed, being itself begetting. He is the only true being, the ipsum et subsistens. But if the word is a God, If he's a created being, then the statement that you are the same, you do not change, doesn't make sense. This is why I'm inclined to believe that again, once again, if we go back to what we are trying to address, that in terms of one, the association, it is associating. Therefore, after we have gone through this, it is associating, okay, the word in John 1:1 to the God in Genesis chapter 1, verses number 1. 2, it is distincting, it is this creating a distinction, okay, between the word in John 1:1 to the God in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. But then in describing the nature and his being, it is saying that it is of the very same nature, very same being as the one in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Of course, in this regard, we could even quote Philippians chapter 2, verse 5 and 6, that he who was in the very form of God, very being of God, did not count equality with God something to be grasped upon, held on to. Okay, but then we just want to stick with the few verses we are elaborating on, because I realized the video has gone on longer than I expected to be. So what is my conclusion on it? My conclusion is that we are confined therefore by the claims in Isaiah 43:10 that prior to God there was no God formation, and after that there is no God formation, to argue and believe the Shema Israel that the Lord your God, the Lord is one, both in unity in distinction, that He is the only true sense of the word God. That there can be no legitimate gods, no matter whether or not the person deserves to be worshipped or not. There can be no legitimate gods. And 2, therefore, by the regards of Psalm 102 and also Hebrews, we understand therefore that the word in this question has the very same nature as the God in the Old Testament. And 3, yet there are distinctions. Again, this is why we are confined to the belief of the triunity of God. Okay, it is because Scripture confines us to believe that God is in the, at least this point. We have not talked about the Holy Spirit. At this point, we are talking therefore about some people in the Bible, some entities, some beings in the Bible who have the exact same being as the only true being of God in the world. Yet they are two distinct persons as a whole. Yet they are two distinct persons as a whole. I had a second argument I wanted to give, a third argument I wanted to give. And this argument would have been far more technical in the Greek. Because just this part of the video has gone on for so long, I'll pause it here and I'll put the link in the description below. And then in the next video, I'm going to address the claim of Jesus as the Archangel Michael. I hope this video was a blessing to you. If it was, leave a comment and I'll be sure to read it. And of course, like the video as well. Thank you. And I remain Solomon Kennedy Chiramode.